Running is like you have very specific quantifiable goals. You want to be able to finish such and such a distance, or you want to be able to run such and such a time. And when you achieve one of those goals, it feels really good for like 48 seconds. And then you're like, I wonder if I can do the next thing. And so if you stick with running long enough and you rack up a bunch of goals that you've achieved and you realize none of them was the ultimate destination you were looking for. You can hear the cliche that it's the journey, not the destination that matters. You can hear that a billion times, but people telling it to you, it never really sinks in, right? But I think running has been the most effective way for me to then extend that to the rest of my life, to understand that whatever I'm striving for, it's important to be striving towards it. But once I get there, I will forget that that's all I ever wanted to do, that I just wanted to climb that hill. I'll be looking and like, oh, there's another hill up there. It's okay to keep moving, but you need to strip yourself of the illusion that the next hill is going to be the final hill. There's going to be an infinite sequence of hills beyond that. And that's just the nature of what it means to move through life. Hi, I'm Alex Hutchinson, and I am a renegade.
Welcome to the RUNEGADE Podcast, where today we are thrilled to sit down with Alex Hutchinson, a man whose life reads like a masterclass in chasing the unknown and embracing the journey. Alex isn't just a voice in the world of running and science. He's lived it, he's breathed it, and he's written it into existence. A former Canadian national team middle distance runner, Alex pounded the track with the grit of a competitor, earning a spot among the country's elite before pivoting to academia, where he earned his PhD in physics from Cambridge. Yes, physics, because why not tackle the mysteries of the universe before turning to the mysteries of human endurance? As a journalist, Alex has become a beacon of clarity in the fitness world, penning the beloved Sweat Science column for Outside magazine, breaking down complex research with a storyteller's finesse. His first book, Endure, a New York Times bestseller, redefined how we think about the limits of human performance, blending mind, body, and science into a gripping narrative that runners and dreamers alike still clutch to their chests. Now, with his second book, The Explorer's Gene, Why We Seek Big Challenges, New Flavors, and the Blank Spots on the Map, Alex takes us deeper into the evolutionary wiring that drives us all to explore, to risk, to seek meaning in a world that's all too mapped out. This book feels like Alex working through his own odyssey, from the trails he's run to the questions he's chased as a scientist and a writer. It feels almost like he's been wrestling with that itch, that restless itch that we all feel, the call to break free from routine, to find the blank spots in our own lives. And he concluded that exploration in all its messy glory is the truest path to a life well lived. And you know what? We couldn't agree more. The Explorer's Gene isn't just a book, it's a manifesto for runners, thinkers, and anyone daring enough to step into the unknown. So let's dive into it with Alex Hutchinson and unpack what it means to chase the horizon. Renegade is proud to be sponsored by Thrive Protein. We love sharing what works for us. Power your runs and fuel your endurance with Thrive Protein, the premier plant-based supplement brand crafted for endurance athletes. They offer high-quality vegan protein powders, whey, super greens, and electrolytes and creatine. Thrive's clean Ontario-made products fuel your body with natural ingredients with no artificial fillers, designed to boost recovery, enhance endurance, and keep you strong on the trails, the roads, or wherever your endurance adventure takes you. Thrive is perfect for every athlete chasing their big goals. Visit thriveprotein.ca and use the code RUNEGADE for 20% off your order. Thrive Protein. Fuel your relentless pursuit of adventure. Welcome to the RUNEGADE Podcast. Each episode, we explore what it means to be a runner, a human, in this crazy thing that we call life. I'm Todd Marentette, and with me,
good old Uncle Mark.
What are you enjoying this evening?
Well, other than the wonderful company that we have here on this podcast, I am going to be going with another Upside Down Blonde. How about yourself?
I'm going with the Hyena IPA. Mark, you helped me out last episode. I couldn't figure out what Hyena stood for, but high electrolytes, non-alcoholic beer brewed here in Ontario, and it's fantastic. Cheers. Whether you're out exploring, seeking a big challenge, or those blank spots on the map, there's an athletic brew or Hyena brew that you can unpack. Terrible. Thank you for joining. This is your third appearance on the Renegade. We're going into the end of our second season. I think this is episode 44. And we're really looking forward to unpacking your new book, The Explorer's Gene, Why We Seek Out Big Challenges, New Flavors, and the Blank Spots on the Map. Alex, great book. I was with the family in Italy this summer, and I was sitting on the Amalfi Coast reading The Explorer's Gene, and I went exploring on a goat trail. I got a little bit lost, but I was trying to put to practice some of the great nuggets and knowledge that you share in this book. Maybe you can tell us about the thesis of this book and let's get into it. Like, what made you decide to write a book about exploring?
Yeah. And to be honest, it was a bit of a departure. It was not didn't follow naturally from my previous, I've been in the endurance world for, 15 years or something. And so my last book was Endure. The logical next book would have been Endure 2. But I felt the urge to, as I was contemplating what my next move was after Endure, I couldn't shake this feeling that even though I remain fascinated by endurance, I didn't want to write another book that was just kind of, here's some more things that I thought about with endurance. And this is, from a rational career planning point of view, this was not a smart move to say like, hey, you've just spent 10 years establishing yourself as the guy in this niche. So why don't you just leave it behind? Just try something different. And so I was puzzled by this urge. And so I started to think about it. I was like, why do I want to do something new? And how does this connect to previous swerves in my career? I started out as a physicist and only switched to journalism in my late 20s. How does it connect to the way I like to travel? Because I haven't been on the Amalfi Coast, but when I like to travel, when I travel, I like to get the feeling that I'm off the beaten path. I like to look for places that are that feel new to me and that feel undiscovered. And what's that all like? Are we wired to explore? And so ultimately, that's what I decided to explore in the book, to try and understand: are we wired to explore? If we are, what's it for? Is it always good? Or should I have resisted the urge to explore and stuck with endurance? Like, is there a case to be made that exploiting in the exploring literature, there's the dichotomy between exploring and exploiting, where exploiting is taking advantage of what you already know and exploring is doing something different. So all of this stuff is what I decided to explore, and the answers are complicated. It's not always explore more is always better, but it's think carefully about how you make these decisions and don't get stuck in a rut, but also don't just never take advantage or never stop to enjoy where you are and always be seeking the next thing.
That's it. It's about being present, right? And so with Todd's story there, he must have been on the far side of the want curve then, right? If
he might have been right in the sweet spot. The want curve is that finding, you don't want it to be easy, but you don't want it to be impossible. And he's alive here today. He's with us. He didn't die. So I would argue that maybe he liked being lost a little bit. Maybe he enjoyed the challenge. Maybe he felt more vividly alive than if he just sat in a deck chair or, got on a bus and looked out the window and at a cathedral or something like that. He went and got lost and well done to him on that.
Maybe I'm still there mentally. Who knows?
Yeah. You left it all behind, but
those photos are just an amazing trip there, Todd. So I know that many times I felt that I wish I was there too. So Alex, your book, you cover a lot of ground there in between, polar treks and then also things like, exploring new like recipes and things like that. So did you feel that it was very important to make it just to show that exploration just isn't for extreme adventurers and that it can be for everyday people too, like even myself?
Yeah, for sure. And I should also note there's a connection to running here too, that for me, what's interesting about running is in a lot of ways is the search to discover new things about myself. It's almost a form of like, yeah, I like running on new routes sometimes, but I also, even when I'm running on the same route, even if I'm racing the same race I raced last year and the year before, I'm trying to figure out what I'm capable of. And it's a form of exploration, like how will I do today? And so, when you write a book about exploring, you end up in a lot of like cocktail party type conversations where you're like, I'm writing a book about exploring. Oh, that sounds really interesting. But and they're lying, and it doesn't sound interesting because they're like, it sounds interesting for you, but I personally am not an explorer. And I push back against that idea, because I think maybe not all of us, but the vast majority of us like to discover new things in some domain. And saying I'm not an explorer is a way of saying I don't want to, trek across the Sahara Desert in sandals. That's fair enough. I don't want to either. But in the things that the food that people choose to cook, the books they choose to read, the ideas they think about, there's a lot of forms of exploration. And one of the things that I didn't know when I started researching the book, but that I sort of came to discover as I talked to scientists, is this isn't just a metaphorical thing that's like, exploring the Arctic is kind of like exploring new ideas. It's like, no, we actually use the same parts of our brain. We map new spaces in our hippocampus. We make cognitive maps. We map ideas and people. We map our social networks in the hippocampus. We map concepts. And so finding a shortcut or expanding to a new place or finding a shortcut between two places is like finding a connection between two distant ideas. And we map it in the same way. And it's the same sort of thrill of discovery or of innovation. So yeah, I think it's, to answer your question in a more concise way, exploring is a lot of different things. It's not just physical. And I absolutely think that if you scratch hard enough, everyone will find a domain in which they love to explore.
Absolutely. And are you the kind of person that tries different things out on a menu, or do you stick to the same thing every single time? I have to know.
So, this is the classic statement of the explore exploit dilemma is, what do you order in a restaurant? Do you go back to the old standby that worked, or do you try something new? One of the important points about the explore exploit dilemma is that it really is a dilemma. It's not that one is better than the other. It's this dilemma. And so in the restaurant context, I tip back and forth between those two things. I have favorites and I love to go back to my favorites. I would say I'm pretty strongly, probably if I had to choose which camp I'm more in, it's like, no, I should try that thing that I've never seen on the menu. I should really give that a try. But that often leaves me with regrets, especially if someone else at the table orders my favorite. And I'm like, oh man, this thing I ordered, it's like, what the hell is it? I don't even know what it is. And meanwhile, someone over there's like, oh, this is really good, this thing that you usually order. So yeah, I'm drawn to the new thing, but boy, do I, it is not always the right choice, and it's not always an easy choice. I agonize at the menu all the time.
Well, the whole explore exploit, you can also think about as runners, do you explore a brand new pair of running shoes, or do you exploit the brand that you've been wearing all along? And you know what? Sometimes exploring those new pair of running shoes, you're going to unlock some pretty cool performances, especially if those carbon fiber ones are those super shoes.
Yeah, or sometimes you're going to unlock a stress fracture. Like it's hard to know. But yeah, if you don't try, like one of the neat data sets I came across while researching the book, going back to the ordering in restaurants thing, is there was Harvard scientists analyzed like 1.6 million orders from a food delivery company called Deliveroo. It's like a European version of Uber Eats. And so they get a sense, okay, how do people actually deal with this ordering new stuff versus ordering or going back to the same? And there's a lot of interesting insights, one of which is that people do like to pursue undiscovered restaurants, like restaurants that have fewer ratings. All else being equal, people will prefer to order from them. Okay, so it's like being drawn to the unknown. But the other thing about it is that, I think the big finding is that in the short term, exploring when you order gives you worse meals. You're more likely to have on average, you'll have a lower rating if you order from a restaurant you've never ordered before. But in the long term, if you stick with it, you end up with better results. Because you try a new restaurant. If it's bad, you don't go back to that restaurant. If it's good, you add it to your rotation. And so over time, your meals get better and better. So to the running shoe example, or to any other example, the thing is like, yeah, if you deviate from your standby favorite brand, on average, you're going to be disappointed in the short term. But in the long term, it's going to get better. And so if you don't explore, you're missing out on the opportunity for the long-term development because you're scared of the short-term disappointment that often comes with exploring.
That's really interesting. Alex, I think in the book, you said something along the lines of like, exploring makes us feel good. You often find that something is better over the next hill. But how do you dovetail that in with the human response of nature to once you get past that hill, you kind of look back and you misremember that the past was actually really good. You're like, no, it used to be so good. How do you balance that? Like, that next hill might get better. Then you get to the next hill and be like, but I really had a good back there. Like, I don't know how to come to terms with that.
Yeah, couple things to say to that. One is that when I think about, how do we decide whether to explore? How do we justify exploring? There's two very different ways of thinking about it. It's kind of the math and the psychology. And so you can, or the utilitarian approach and the psychological approach. You can say, I'm going to explore because I think it's going to lead me to better outcomes. I'm going to have a better meal, or I'm going to run a PB in new shoes or whatever. Or you can say, I'm going to explore because it's fun to try new things, and I'll feel like I'm really engaged in this adventure, and that's awesome. And those two things are linked, right? Like because of evolution, it's like the reason exploring feels fun, the reason the unknown is attractive is because it has helped guide us to new ways of doing things, new sources of food, new places to live, and so on. So they're linked, but they're not the same. So what we're feeling about the desire to explore is kind of just it's a subjective feeling, and in 2025 we can choose to explore whether or not it leads to a better thing. If it feels good, it kind of like that's a justification in and of itself. So that's one point I wanted to make. The other thing is that I think so about your point about you get over the next hill and you all of a sudden you can't remember what it was like on the previous hill. I think running is the best laboratory for learning to deal with that thing, with that problem that there is. Running is like, you have very specific quantifiable goals. You want to be able to finish such and such a distance, or you want to be able to run such and such a time. And when you achieve one of those goals, it feels really good for like 48 seconds. And then you're like, I wonder if I can do the next thing. And so if you stick with running long enough, and you rack up a bunch of goals that you've achieved, and you realize that none of them was the one that was going to change. None of them was the ultimate destination you were looking for. You can hear the cliche that it's the journey, not the destination that matters. You can hear that a billion times, but people telling it to you, it never really sinks in, right? But I think running has been the most effective way for me to then extend that to the rest of my life, to understand that whatever I'm striving for, it's important to be striving towards it, but once I get there, I will forget that that's all I ever wanted to do, that I just wanted to climb that hill. I'll be looking and like, oh, there's another hill up there. Let's see if we can get to that peak. And that's okay. It's okay to keep moving, but you need to strip yourself of the illusion that the next hill is going to be the final hill. You need to know already that there's going to be an infinite sequence of hills beyond that. And that's just the nature of what it means to move through life.
Absolutely. And for those new runners that are out there, they might not come to terms with that. You mentioned that until you experience yourself, it's hard to listen or hard to like comprehend. You think that your first finish of, are you going to break 3 hours in a marathon, or are you going to break 4 hours in a marathon? You think it's actually going to linger and you're going to feel good about it. But no, you actually, like 42 seconds later, you're like, oh, what can I do next? And there was a few folks that we've talked to on the podcast, and maybe going back to your racing experience. When you finished your races, were you relieved that it was over at that point in time? Or were you, like I heard like a few folks talk to us about that. When they got the race done, they were just like so glad it was done.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty overwhelming feeling for me. Now, the specific feeling depends a little bit on how the race went. Like if I really pooched it, then I'm not relieved it's done. I want to go back and I want to do it again and I want to do it better. But for the most part, I'm a nervous racer, right? Like I'm nervous in the lead up to races, and the more I care about the race, the more I feel the weight of these non-existent. Like nobody else cares how I do, so it's like there's no expectations on me, but I care, and so it becomes a burden. And look, I try to have a more healthy relationship with racing. I tried, again, this is one of those things like you can say, hey, relax, no one else cares, but I get very nervous. And so when the race finishes, I'm like, whether or not I achieved my goal, I am very relieved it's done. And I often am thinking, well, I guess I'm never going to race again because boy, I'm glad it was over. But it's just like, if we could truly remember things, no one would ever have 2 kids, right? Because you'd remember like, my God, this was hard. Why would I do this again? But we have kids with families with multiple kids, and we have people like us who go back and race again and again. It's coming. Yeah.
See if I can do the same thing, but have better results, right?
Yeah. Insanity. The definition of insanity is hoping that next time I'm going to enjoy the race. It's going to be a fulfilling and fun experience instead of a challenging experience. I'll frame that not too negatively.
So, Alex, I had a thought on just technology. So here in 2025, we have access to Google, we have access to AI, and I just can't help but wonder if that's impacted our ability to explore, because we can now go and we can review any kind of technology. Any kind of like vehicle, shoes, anything else. And it kind of takes that thrill out of just making that decision to go ahead and do it and then find out if it is unexpected consequence that's positive or negative there. So you get that hit of dopamine. So do you feel that technology has kind of hurt the explorer in modern day?
I do. Now I should qualify that by saying technology is a tool and it can be used in different ways. And there's ways that all sorts of technologies can be used to enhance exploration. But I think on the balance, the way most of us sort of intuitively use them is in a way that stifles exploration. So a simple example of that would be, it's like we all have GPS maps on our phones that are now that can be a super useful thing to allow exploration. I was in Paris earlier in the summer, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go for a run. I'm not gonna plot out a route like I normally would obsessively. I can see in the distance there's an Eiffel Tower over there. That seems cool. Let's see if I can run over to the Eiffel Tower and run back. Now, Paris is a super confusing city. Like within like 8 steps, I was going in the wrong direction. I'm like, how did the Eiffel Tower get behind me? What the hell's going on? And so that's fine. I can pull out my phone and I can check it out. And I'm like, I need to go down this way. And so then I run, and 5 minutes later I'm lost. So in that sense, having a GPS with me enabled me to be more exploratory because I had a backstop. But by the same token, the real thing that happens on a much more regular basis is that, like, I'm going to drive my kids to soccer practice for the 48th time this week, and I know exactly how to get to the place where they practice, but I still turn on turn-by-turn directions. And so I'm not building up a map of my neighborhood or of my city. I'm just following like, oh, turn left when the thing beeps and says turn left. And so in that way, and that's the sort of dominant way that we use these things. Although one of the things I've resolved to do after the research for this book is that I really try not to use turn-by-turn directions unless I need them. But anyway, be that as it may, like, I think a lot of technologies are like that. And so in terms of what you can do online, it's like when I go on a hiking trip, let's say, no matter how obscure a place I go to, I can go online and find basically endless trip blogs where someone has taken 52, pictures and plotted out every day. And on the one hand, that gives me more confidence to say, yeah, I can handle this hike. Like, I'm not venturing into I'm not a intrepid back explorer. I'm just like some guy. So it's like, okay, I can see this. This is something I can handle. And I know from reading this guy's blog, I should bring crampons or whatever. And that makes the trip more accessible. But because of if I do too much preparation, and that's generally my personality, then it's like, I go and do the hike and it's like, yeah, it's exactly what I expected from the 52 blogs I read on this. And that's like, there's nothing more deflating than to fly halfway around the world and spend a week doing an amazing trip, and your reaction is say, great, it's just like the pictures. Like that's not that's not that exciting. And so I've actually kind of dialed back and tried to be like, I want to do enough preparation to be safe, but I don't want to like lose the actual opportunity for serendipity, for going around a corner and saying, holy crap, there's a waterfall here. Isn't this beautiful? As opposed to, hey, there's the waterfall that I expected on day 4 because I
Alex, we were just talking about the uncertainty bonus, but I want to go back to something that Mark was touching on earlier about like technology. And you think of runners, we have our watches on, we got wearables, we got Oura rings, we got everything in the world. What does that do? I know you made mention about you stopped using your GPS to find routes after doing the research for this book, and it has something to do with shrinking hippocampus. Is that correct?
So there's two reasons that I stopped using turn-by-turn directions. One is there's this line of research that links following just kind of stimulus response navigation, just sort of turning left when the machine turns left, says turn left, that links that to shrinking hippocampus, and a smaller hippocampus is linked to higher risk of a bunch of conditions like Alzheimer's. This is like small studies, preliminary research, so I don't want to oversell. Like, I don't think I'd be cautious about pushing that too hard, although it certainly played a role in my decision. But the other side of it is just like the nature of the experience. And I would compare it to like, what's the difference between driving a car and sitting in the passenger seat, driving through a city? You get to the other side, you get to your destination and ask, so how do you find your way back? If you're in the driver's seat, you have some idea of how to do that, or at least you would have 20 years ago before GPS. If you're in the passenger seat, you have no idea. You were just driving along. You're seeing all the same things out the windshield, but you were a passive passenger. You weren't you weren't having to focus on the world. So to me, on the GPS side, it's about the nature of the experience, about being present and seeing what's around you. And you have to do that. You have to pay attention to the world if you are the one making the decisions. Now, in terms of running, so it's a little bit different. Like, you have a GPS watch, that's not going to force you to not pay attention. But I do think there's a connection there in terms of exploring your own capabilities, in terms of the difference between I'm going out for a run and I'm watching my GPS, it's telling me when to speed up, it's telling me when to slow down, versus I'm going out for a run and I'm trying to feel when I'm on the edge, when I can speed up and when I can slow down. I'm trying to discover what my capabilities are instead of relying on a machine to tell me what its estimate of my capabilities are. So look, I realize I sound like a curmudgeon. Like, back in my day, we used the sundial to time our runs. And I think there's, just like I was saying earlier about technology in general and GPS in particular can enable exploration as well as restrict it. I think, wearable technology can be a really useful tool, but I think it can also become a crutch that enables us to be less thoughtful about the exploration of our own limits.
No, I definitely feel that too, because and like what you're saying before, like, we like putting on the GPS when we're just traveling around, because then the kids can see, okay, it's going to be 15 more minutes till we get home. And you just kind of go into then autopilot mode. But at the same time, like, yes, you're focused on the road and what's ahead of you, but knowing that you're not as concerned about getting lost, it does allow you to kind of, I never noticed that building before. And that's a place I'm going to have to put in the back of my mind to go back and, explore at a time that I actually don't have the kids with me. And, when time allows it to happen. So I can see both sides of it. I find that very interesting though. I am trying to be a little bit more mindful of all the tech that I use, because we are constantly, and I see my kids starting to use technology all the time too. And it's like, it's a slippery slope, right? So I think it's great that you've identified it and you've course corrected, and I don't really have a question that's coming out of this.
Yeah, well, look, and when you say of course corrected, I'm trying to course correct, but it's a constant battle. My feeling in general is, a century ago or whenever, we had the dawn of all these labor-saving devices, and it's great. Not many of us are out there shoveling coal these days, and I don't have any desire to go back to shoveling coal. But we also have realized that, if you remove all physical challenge from our lives, we end up really unhealthy and unhappy, and it's just not a good thing. And so now we're trying to retrofit opportunities for physical challenge into our lives. We exercise, we go for runs, we run ultra marathons, we do all these things. And part of it, at least the impetus for a lot of this, is like, turns out we do need to use our bodies, even though we're now capable of engineering all physical challenge out of our lives. I think we're at the start of a similar process and a similar set of realizations about mental challenge, that it's like, isn't it nice that we don't have to, we have calculators. We don't have to, memorize the times table. Isn't it nice we don't have to calculate how much to tip at the restaurant now, because we don't have to do mental arithmetic. And, fast forward from that to, hey, isn't it nice that AI can do everything that I need to do and can write my emails and can, communicate with my spouse for me and, eliminate all mental effort. We're going to realize that, oh, wait, if you don't use your brain, that's not healthy either. That's not good for your well-being. It's not good for your happiness. And it may not even be good for the physical structure of your brain, because like every other part of your body, it's going to atrophy if you don't use it. So it's not that we're going to, and I have no desire to reject all labor-saving devices. And similarly, I want to use cognitive effort-saving devices, but I want to make sure that I'm continuing to challenge to use my brain. And maybe I can do more with the aid of, modern technology, but I need to find ways to continue to do things like explore and to struggle and to have to think hard about what the next choice is in some way. And it doesn't have to be the same way that we struggled in the past. It doesn't have to be that I need to get out a paper map and figure out where the hell am I in Paris and how do I get back to my hotel. But I need to find some way of staying engaged with the world around me and using my brain.
From your book, what I enjoyed is the stories, the storytelling. For example, Alexander Mackenzie trying to find a path to the Pacific Ocean and then ultimately arriving in the Arctic Ocean, but then he didn't stop exploring. So it's that unhealthy balance of once you start exploring, how do you know when to stop exploring so that you can actually reap the benefits of all your new findings?
Yeah, it was funny to look through all these tales of explorers to be like, wow, this guy discovered the new continent or made the first crossing. Oh, and then he went on another expedition and died and was eaten by a sea monster or whatever. So, or whatever the case happened to be. And it's like, if you had a time machine, you'd be like, hey, dude, you just reached the pinnacle of your life. You should chill out, enjoy the riches from your discovery, and not head back into the, back to the North Pole, because it's not going to turn out well for you. Of course, none of us have that, helpful friend time with the time machine telling us when to stop exploring. We all think that this is pretty good, but the next one's going to be better. And then I'm going to stop. Then I'm going to say, this is exactly what I wanted to achieve. I don't think there's any answer to that other than, we were talking about a little bit about it earlier, that you kind of have to accept that the destination is that there is no final destination. And so to the extent that you stay on the journey, that you keep, re-upping to sign up for another race, you don't imagine that it's going to solve all your problems, and you need to do it in a sustainable way. So look, I think about this a lot as I turned 50 this year, and I'm not saying I'm having a midlife crisis, but yeah, I'm probably having a little bit of midlife crisis energy of, trying to figure out like, what do I do? Do I try and set bigger goals and do better, and everything has to be bigger and better than, like, is it always I have to keep getting better? Or can I be like, I kind of like the plateau here. I'm going to keep doing what I enjoy doing. And I'm trying to recalibrate a little bit. And, honestly, for me right now, that means, let's say I'm going to shrink a little bit the amount of my soul that I'm devoting to professional activities and grow the amount that I'm giving to my kids and my wife, because it's like, yeah, when you're 21, it's like your ambitions are limitless, and you want to do anything to climb the mountain, and that's appropriate, maybe, like, because one thing, when you dig into the sort of science of exploring and what makes sense, how do you make this exploit dilemma? It's like, it makes sense to explore when you're young, to find out as much as you can about the world. But it also makes sense to, as you get older, to dial that back a little bit, to not to stop exploring, but to say, I've done a lot of exploring, and so I should take advantage of the things I know. Like one of the analogies you can use is like, what kind of music do you listen to? And most of us have the broadest sort of range of things we listen to in our teens and late teens, early 20s, and then we sort of gradually stop listening to new music. And in one sense, that's really sad. It's like, hey, I'm 49 years old. Why shouldn't I listen to new music? I don't have to just listen to the stuff that I listened to when I was 21. But on the other hand, I've spent a lot of time exploring different kinds of music, and now I know some stuff that I really like. What's wrong with, chilling out on the sofa and listening to the tunes I love? We know it would be nonsensical to say, I'm going to be an explorer all my life, so I'm never going to listen to the same song twice. I'm always going to be listening to new stuff. It's like, no, you find a new song, you find a song you love, you want to keep listening to it. And the longer you've been on the planet, the more stuff you love. So it makes sense to kind of, allow yourself to enjoy the things you love instead of always feeling like you need to be moving on to the next thing.
I think it's really important to just kind of what you're saying, not to put it off as well, because I think of, all the folks that are like, saving for my retirement and then I'm going to travel the world at that point in time. And then knowing that you're not going to have, you don't know, depending on how you keep care of yourself and if you have your health with you, but it's taking, I think if I'm thinking about the blank spots on the map for me right now, it's, well, what can I explore with my kids? Because it's a different kind of experience than when my wife and I would go and experience something, right? Like you're as adults going somewhere, and there's just so much opportunity to fill in those blank spaces or those blank spots on that map, right? So I don't know, are there certain key things as well for you, like when it comes to sport? So we were talking about running, but what about trying all kinds of other, like cycling or things like that? Is that something that you've kind of dove into as well and gone different directions on?
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's maybe 10 years ago, I started dabbling with a little bit of rock climbing, and I'm embarrassed to say it because I'm really bad at it. So no one should take this to mean that I'm actually a competent rock climber, but I started doing it, and it was really interesting to me because I'd never done anything like that before. And it was like, and I realized, boy, it's been a long, long time since I've been this bad at something. Like since I've been done something so unfamiliar, because, at that point I'm 40 years old or whatever. And it's like, I know the things I'm good at, and those are the things I've been doing. I've kind of specialized, and it's like, oh, I forgot about learning new things. It's interesting. It's uncomfortable, but it's also really neat and really, really rewarding. And so I've had a sort of on again, off again relationship with rock climbing, where I'm like, I really find this interesting, but then it's like, oh, but I signed up for this 5K, and wow, with very little effort, I'm way, way, way better at running a 5K than I am at climbing a like very basic toddler's rock climbing challenge. And then lately I've picked up last, 7 or 8 years, I've started playing pickup basketball on Friday nights. And basketball is something that I played a lot in high school. I played quite seriously. And then I hadn't played for 20 plus years. And then I came back to it, and it's been really fun to rediscover that. It's hard to compare myself. Like one of the friends I play with sometimes videos some of our games and posts them for us to see. And we're all like, why is it in slow motion? Like, why are we moving so slowly? That can't possibly be us. But it's, I get so much joy from playing basketball, but then I have the tension with like, I'm going to run cross country this fall. And I'm like, I don't really want to play basketball on Friday nights because I'm trying to do a workout with my friends on Saturday morning. And now my Saturday morning workout sucks because I played basketball Friday night and I can barely move. So there's a tension between sticking with what you really know, which for me is running in the sports domain, and trying out new things and recognizing the joy that those new things bring, but also recognizing that there's a trade-off. You can't have everything to the max. You have to make choices for sure.
And maybe that's what I was taking away from the book, Alex. So when I was traveling this summer, I just had a new job. And you know what? Maybe being on the new job for about a month, living through all those emotions of you came from a past that you were really good at, and now you got something brand new to do. You have to learn. You're feeling kind of nervous, a little bit of stress because there's all kinds of new stuff. You're putting that pressure on. And then hopefully you get up to speed a little bit and you can keep on running. And maybe that's what the link to running would be, is if you're really good at a 5K, give yourself a shot at a 10K. If you're really good at a 10K, try a trail race. And you can explore just for fun by different races, different distances. And we're going to get older every single year. So you can try to run your best time at a certain age. It's almost limitless to what you can explore with running.
Yeah. And I'd say, earlier we were talking and I was saying there's two ways you can think about exploring. One is to like get good things, and one is to feel good. And so you can make both arguments for running. It's like, if you're relatively new to running, it's like, okay, everyone's running a marathon, you're going to run a marathon. But like, I have friends who started out running marathons in their 20s. And then I have a couple of them like this who then, got more into running, ran some 10Ks and they were good at that, then ran 5Ks and were better at that. And they're like, oh, maybe I should try some track running. They tried 1500. They're excellent at that. They try 800 and they're like world-class masters runners. And it's like, they wish they had discovered that when they were 25 instead of 45 or 30, 35. But it's like, so by exploring, you give yourself a better chance to find that you may find that you're actually even better at some of these other options. So there's a utilitarian argument, but then like you said, there's also it's fun, even if you don't turn out to be better at this other thing that you've tried. It's like, running is, look, I love running. I love running, more than any other activity. But it's a pretty repetitive activity, right? Like I remember a friend in college, I subscribed to Runner's World, and they were like, "You get a running magazine? Like, what is there to write about running other than like left, right, left, right, left, right? Is that the whole magazine? Like, what is there to say?" And it's like, yeah, the truth is running has certain element of repetition in it, and so. Yeah, like try something different. Try an orienteering race. Try a track race. Try an an off-road race. All these things are ways of bringing some of that feeling of excitement that you felt when you first picked up the sport.
So something like, being blindfolded and being dropped anywhere in Toronto and having to find your way home could be, a nice way of looking at it, right?
That sounds awesome in theory. It sounds like completely nuts in practice, but I'm not judging. That would be very cool. But don't do it to me. Do not kidnap me.
Renegades, strap in for a gear drop that's going to supercharge your running and style. We are stoked to spotlight Path Project's latest apparel, built for runners who live for the grind and want to look damn good doing it. First up, the James Peak shirt. A trail-ready beast with Toray Air Prime Flex fabric. It's crazy breathable, sweat-slaying, and stretchy, keeping you fresh from the sunrise sprints to those post-run hangouts. Next, the Fortuna Hybrid Short. This is your do-it-all wingman, crafted with Delta Weave, recycled nylon and spandex. These water-resistant, quick-drying shorts are perfect for the run, swims, or just chilling with slick pockets for your essentials. And don't you sleep on their famous Graves PX running short, re-engineered with Featherlight Prime Flex fabric and secure pocketing. They're built for crushing all your miles. Founded in 2018, Path Projects delivers runner-first gear with soul. Check them out at pathprojects.com. Make 2025 your fiercest running year yet. And thank you to Path Projects. You can use the code TRP10 for 10% off your order for a limited time. So check them out.
One thing I found fascinating in the book, Alex, was the DRD4 gene variant, right? So this is the gene variant that maybe shows that some could be more predisposed to risk-taking, to adventure-seeking. From your research, how much is it genetic and how much is exploring a product of the environment that we're actually in?
Yeah. So, and it's like the title of my book is The Explorer's Gene, which is kind of, let's say, provocative. But the truth is, so the fact that there's some genetics, I think, is super interesting. That there are genes that you can see are associated with exploring behavior. And to me, the biggest message from that is not that some people are born to explore and some people aren't. It's that we're all born to explore because we all have these same genes. It's just that some of us have the volume turned up a little higher than others on this urge to explore. So the message isn't that it's like, yes, you explore, or no, you don't explore. It's, yeah, this dopamine receptor really does predispose us to all of us to explore it to varying degrees. Now, in terms of nature versus nurture, I don't have a good science-based answer for that. No one has tried to test it. But my intuition, let's say, or my sort of reading of the general literature is that it's more environment and contextual than it is genetic. That what we decide to do at any given moment has a lot to do with how we're brought up and what we bring to a given situation. So, for example, we were talking earlier, are you gonna trek to the North Pole or try and explore across a barren desert? Well, someone who's got a lot of physical fitness is going to be more likely to want to, or who's going to climb a mountain, someone who's strong and has those traits. And similarly, who's going to explore really interesting or far out music? Well, it's not going to be someone who was born tone deaf, right? There's going to, so the context of our skills and our experiences and the things we're comfortable with and the things we're interested in, I think have a much bigger impact on whether we choose to explore in a given context than whether we happen to have the DRD4 gene variant or other things like that.
Well, going into the music concept for a second, Alex, when you're out for a run, what are you listening to nowadays, and how has your taste changed as you explore new styles and genres of music?
Well, I will say, and I marking myself as a Luddite once again, I listen to the beautiful internal soundtrack of my thoughts, and the birds tweeting. Yeah, so I don't. I just like to let my thoughts wander when I run. In terms of what I listen to, it's interesting. I'm kind of the classic, much as I hate to say it, I'm the classic example of someone whose tastes I have regressed as my life has gotten busier. So, I'm a jazz guy. I that's what I grew up really loving and obsessing about. And as I got, from my teens into my 20s, I started to listen to kind of more esoteric, more far out, more dissonant, more complicated jazz. And then as life got busier, and especially like once I had kids, I just noticed it's like, I want to listen to the music that I listened to when I was like 15, which was, much less. It's like in jazz history, I went from like, I'm into 1940s, and then I'm into the 1950s. And it's like, I'm into the 1960s. Now I'm like, I'm back to the 1940s and even some 1930s stuff. And so, and I think it's a reflection of like the way that different types of exploring interact. It's like, I'm exploring what it's like to be a dad, and I'm exploring career stuff, and I'm doing a bunch of stuff. So when my bandwidth is full of exploration in some contexts, in other contexts, and for me it's music, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to exploit that. I don't need any more exploration in my life right now. And so we'll see what happens. In a decade, I'll have an empty nest, and who knows, maybe I'll be making crazy, like, a century or 21st century punk classical crossover or something, just doing crazy stuff. But right now I'm like, yeah, I'm back to Charlie Parker.
So you play as well then? Are you a musician? It sounds like.
I was a pretty serious alto saxophonist. I haven't played in the last, let's say, I haven't played with anybody or in a band for the last decade or so, but one of my sort of cherished dreams is at some indeterminate point in the future, I find a band to play with, and I get back into that, because that's a real source of joy and a real source of exploration. Like jazz is improvisational. It's like every time you play a song, it's different. I love that.
Absolutely. Oh, that's fascinating. I was going to say, just with being able to explore different key signatures, timing, everything like that, like you're all over the map there. So you can spend the rest of your life doing that if you wanted to, right?
Absolutely. It's one of my little fantasies of like, yeah, I'd love to have a little electronic music setup with a keyboard and a computer where I can sort of make my own band. I could see like that could be a full-time hobby. I could retire tomorrow and be happy doing that. I mean, I could, from an interest point of view, from a financial point of view, I could not retire tomorrow, but that's another story.
Yeah. You could go viral. You never know, right?
Let's try. Let's do something crazy.
Well, we got two band members here. You got Mark on the bass, and you got Alex on the alto sax. This could be pretty good. Maybe we can record an intro for the episode. We'll be ready to
hit the road.
Yeah, Todd, we need your vocals.
I'll be the producer.
Okay, Phil Spector.
Behind the scenes, nobody wants to hear or see that. No, I love it. Alex, I was thinking you wrote a really cool article for the New York Times end of August, and it was really eye-catching because I think it talked about our marathon and extreme runners or runs linked to colon cancer. And I was just wondering, like,
I didn't write that. So the Times picked up that study, and then I wrote a piece for Outside to kind of just contextualize that result. It's
okay.
It was an interesting one. Basically, the gist of the study was that a cancer specialist in, I can't remember, I think it was Virginia, had a couple patients who were serious runners but had colon cancer as young. And he's like, is there a connection here? So he got, I can't remember, about 100 patients in, runners in, serious runners and ultra runners. And he, I guess, colonoscopied them. And in something like, was it 15% of them or 40% of them had some sort of polyp, which is not unusual. And 15% or something had something that might be considered precancerous, which is unusually high. So that created some consternation. And I guess what I would say is we've been down this road before a few times. There's a sort of regular cycle of running is going to kill you in this way or that way or the other way, whether it's your heart or your colon or your bones or whatever. I don't want to dismiss this study. I don't know. I'm seeing my doctor later this month, and I'll be asking for colon cancer screening for sure. I think it's important to check to keep on top of that stuff. This study is what this study is a marker of we need some research because there was no control group. So we don't know how many. If you took 100 random people and put them through their protocol, their specific protocol, we don't necessarily know exactly how many would have been picked up with potentially precancerous lesions or whatever. I don't want to be reflexively like, don't worry about it, nothing there's no problem. But this runs counter to all the previous data where it's just like the more you exercise, the lower your risk of colon cancer. So I hope someone does a follow-up study, and I hope it's done with a control group. And at this point, it wouldn't seem to me to be the basis for changing behavior, but it's something to keep an eye on. And I think whether or not you run, you should keep up on your screenings and your regular kind of contact with the doctor I mean, colon cancer is a classic example of something that grows really slowly. So you catch it early, you're fine. And if you get a clean bill of health, then it's like you're probably good for another decade or maybe not quite that long. So it's a good thing to screen for. So that's basically my take on it, I guess.
Well, my first take when I saw it, I thought, well, maybe the author is trying to like reduce the number of runners because he wants to qualify for Boston or something like that. It's getting too hard to get in these races. So I'll write a really obscure 4D chess article. Here.
He's exactly. thinking laterally. Yeah, that's a good theory.
I kid. But at the same time, too, I couldn't help but think, running is good for the system. You go for a run, you get everything moving. So that's actually probably pretty good for the bowels and everything. So I don't know, more research is required on it. Absolutely. And you're right.
You can argue it in different ways. Maybe that if you're running too much, too hard, then there's, blood flow is diverted away from the gut so that it's starved of oxygen. But yeah, I think let's be honest, running is a good way of promoting regularity. This is a family podcast. I don't want to go too far down that road, but that's generally considered a good thing for digestive health.
Absolutely. We agree.
You know what? That kind of strikes a chord now that I think about it, because I have slowed down in my running over the last year, unfortunately. And I'm trying, I've told everyone that's come on our show that I'm trying to get back into it, and I will, but that's definitely something that didn't really realize until now, that little factoid there. So sorry, everybody.
Got to get you a regular, Mark. We got to get you regular.
You now know. So without giving away, how you close the book, Alex, you do provide some guidelines at the very end, and they all resonate with me for things that I need to do and take into consideration, and exploring and everything. But in terms of one of them, it's the embrace the struggle. I'm not going to tell anyone else any of the other ones, but how have you found that journey or that process, or embracing the struggle when you're taking on new ideas? So we talked even at the beginning of this podcast about endure and then moving into the explorer's gene. Do you find that you embrace the struggle and you learned a lot more than what you thought you were going to find out when you started the journey of writing this book? And is there anything that you took away from all the different stories that you dug into on explorers, people, and are there instances where people just went a little bit too far when they're exploring, and too far to go back or turn back? And do you find that there's something we can learn from that?
Yeah, so the embrace the struggle thing, it's related to an idea that psychologists call the effort paradox, which is the idea that sometimes we value things not in spite of the fact they're hard, but because they're hard. So it's like you when you run a marathon, your goal is not to get from point A to point B, because usually the finish line is literally like a couple blocks away from the start line. If your goal was to get to the finish line, you would just walk over to the finish line. But your goal is not to get to the finish line. Your goal is to travel the distance and to go through this hard thing. And so I think running, again, I may be a bit of a broken record here, but running is a great kind of test laboratory to learn that lesson, that undertaking something hard is hard, but it ends up giving you a feeling that's really hard to replicate in anything else. And that's what this effort paradox says, is that when we do hard things, those tend to be the most meaningful things in our lives, that we're drawn to challenges because they don't make us feel good in a like lying on a feather bed and licking ice cream way, but they make us feel good in a like, that was a really meaningful thing to do. That was a really worthwhile way of spending my effort. So I would say after a lifetime of running and maybe a sort of weird personality, I'm pretty good at embracing the struggle. And so for me, part of what made writing this book attractive was that I knew it would be hard. And it wouldn't be taking the easy choice. It wouldn't be just, all right, let's churn out a sequel to endure. It was like, no, let's try and create something out of whole cloth. And it's going to be really hard. That's why when it's done, I'll be like, I'm really proud of having done that. I'm really glad I did that. Does that mean it's, is it possible to go too far? Yes. And there are, in the book, there are tales of explorers like Burke and Wills, who were the first explorers to make it across the interior of Australia. They went to a better place before they made it back, because they pushed a little too hard and a little too far. And I think all of us can probably think of times metaphorically in our lives where it's like, I guess I didn't know when to quit that time. I should have just read the tea leaves a little better. That's okay. Failure is okay. It's not okay if you're trying to cross Australia, because then you'll die. But in this sort of more metaphorical forms of exploration, even in the context of in a race, you explore, you go out way faster than you've gone out before. You blow up, you DNF, it's not great. No, nobody likes that, but it's not the end of the world. If I have one regret about my racing career, it's that I didn't go out super hard and blow up and just try and find my limits, that I was always quite a cautious racer, really pacing myself. So I think not just embrace the struggle, but embrace the possibility of failure. It's like the first time I went downhill skiing as a kid. I remember, telling my uncle after I went downhill skiing, we were there for a whole week, I didn't fall once. And he was like, you didn't fall once? Obviously you weren't, pushing your limits or trying. Like, if you don't fall, then obviously you were not pushing yourself hard enough. And that really stuck with me. I was like, yeah. If you don't fail, then you probably haven't been trying hard enough. So I try and keep that in mind, and try and keep failure in context. That no one likes failing, but it's a sign. If you fail now and then, it's a sign that you're pushing yourself appropriately. If you fail every time you do something, if you're always biting off more than you can chew, that's also a sign that maybe you need to recalibrate your goals.
It's all about recalibration. Alex, thank you for joining us on this episode of The Renegade. We love the book, and we look forward to so much more. What's next for Alex? What's on your list for the rest of the year?
Well, like I said, I'm hoping to retire in the next week, but it's not going to happen. So, plan B is, for now, I'm really just kind of not recovering, but just kind of, taking some space to figure out what I want to do next. I'm very cognizant that once I leap into a big project, it's going to be probably a multi-year project. So I really want to, in a sense, we can relate this to exploring, in that I want to make sure I've got the right path before I, pack up the expedition and launch myself down it.
Very wise. Very wise. That's the long run. Alex, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I think that's everything. Do we want to do the old, hi, I'm Alex Hutchinson. I'm an explorer for the intro of the podcast, whatever you want.
A noted explorer of ideas about running and science. Whatever you want me to do. Yeah, you tell me what would be helpful.
I think if you want to just try hey, I'm Alex and I'm a running. I know we have that clip already though, but I think each time it's still, that's what people expect now, I guess. The super fans.
Hi, I'm Alex and I'm a renegade.
Yeah, if that's all right. Okay.
Sure. Hi, I'm Alex Hutchinson and I am a renegade.
All right.
Excellent. Great. Excellent, Alex. I'm going to press stop here. We thank you for listening to the Renegade Podcast. Each episode, we set off to explore what it means to be a runner, a human, all in that curious quest of being just a little bit better tomorrow. If you enjoy our Renegade content, we'd really appreciate your support and engagement by subscribing to our YouTube channel and following us wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'd also love to hear from you. If you have a show topic, guest, or a general comment, drop us an email, runegadepodcast@gmail.com. That's RUNEGADE podcast@gmail.com. And remember, in a world of runners, be a renegade.